Hey everyone, Anders Sundquist here, founder of Flawless Recruit and host of the Lean In podcast. And today I have the Labelbox head of talent with me. Elena, I'm grateful for your time, grateful you're here, quite the jet setter recently. So excited to unpack talent philosophy and talent trends in 2025. I'll let you introduce your journey into talent acquisition before we unpack some of these esoteric topics of talent philosophy and the levers that you're pulling to scale. So, why don't you tell everyone how did you get into talent acquisition and arrive at this head of talent role at Labelbox?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be talking about this. So, I think, as many people and many talent leaders, I definitely fell into recruiting first. And, at the time, you couldn't really study to become a recruiter. So, I was a little bit lost, after university. And I joined an NGO and I really enjoyed it. I ended up being in a position where I could open a specialized unit dedicated to a certain market. And I started with a team of five, and I had to grow it and recruit a lot of volunteers really quickly with a very low budget. So it was the perfect school for recruiting.
Nice.
And we ended up hiring about 40 volunteers in 3 4 months, something like that.
Wow.
And I really loved it because being super low budget, it really put me in a position to think about what motivates people. Why would people want to join this organization specifically? What are our selling points? How are we talking about it? And pretty much everything that I talk about to this day, why candidate experience is so important. And I think that was really the click for me. So yeah, that's how I fell into recruiting. And then, from there, I worked in gaming before I joined the wonderful, world of tech. And yeah, I've been at Labelbox for 4 years. I think last week I hit my 4 year mark, or last month.
Yeah, congrats. Quite a milestone in tech. That's like dog years. So
Yeah,
kudos to
especially
you.
for a
Yeah,
small startup. Thank you.
yep, yep.
So yeah, Labelbox, it has been around for about a few years, like since 2018.
Yeah.
I joined 2020, so just 2 years in. We were Series B at the time, about 50 people roughly, and I was their first talent hire. So for context, our mission at Labelbox is to build the best products to align with AI. So as you can imagine, this past year has been very exciting for us. But essentially, we're enabling companies to build and use AI. So um, yeah, very exciting period of time. A lot of changes and pivots. So definitely not getting bored. So yeah, that's what we do. This industry at the time definitely looked a lot different than it does now. But we did grow the team to close to 200 people, and then
Wow.
unfortunately we went through the every kind of I think every company went through recently with layoffs and trying to adjust for this new world
Yeah.
during the pandemic. And unfortunately we had to reduce our team, but now we are strong at 130 and growing, so
Yeah.
positive signs. And in the process, it was very important to me, since I joined Labelbox, to position recruiting as a strategic partner from the beginning. So I
Yes.
think this is going to be really interesting to talk about because I'm very passionate about this. I really see recruiting and talent as a strategic partner, and I've always seen it like that. And I'm happy that the market is now catching up, onto like how valuable this can be for the business. And yeah, I've had my team with me for almost from the beginning, which is also kind of a nice team
Wow.
cohesion going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, now we're here.
So here we are. So Elena, thanks for the background, the context, and the description of label boxes ups and downs, like many in tech, and the right sizing certainly being something that, coming from the Zerpa era post COVID, many companies looked internally and realized there needed to be cuts made, and now are growing again. And being in the AI space, I'm very excited to talk about. sort of your talent philosophy. And I love the energy you bring when we talk about your talent philosophy, and also the mechanics and levers you pull to scale and do more with less and be efficient. So I want to unpack all of this today. But first, let's start with the talent philosophy that you have at Labelbox. And then those phases that you mentioned that we've talked about, the phases you're at today and phases you've come from, so that our audience can understand a bit more depth.
Hmm. Yeah. So I mentioned I joined as the first talent hire for the company,
Yeah.
and I that first phase was really building the foundation. So at the time, and I'm sure this might seem very familiar with people joining at these stages, every hiring manager was kind of doing their own thing, working with
Oh, yeah.
outside agencies, not really, just very, everybody was very resourceful.
Fragmented strategy. Yeah. Yeah. We see that a lot in early stage. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, is great. It works, until a certain point. But when I joined, it was, the reason I joined was to really build that recruiting and talent function inside Labelbox. So that was my mission, for the first
Yeah.
phase. So that building of the foundation was really, or how I understand it, is really um, standardizing as much as possible the processes, but obviously before you get to that point, really understanding what works for the business, what doesn't, really finding kind of that optimized process that is also easy to implement and
Yeah.
get buy-in and actually get adoption and make sure it makes sense for people to follow it and use it. So working through that is actually a quite interesting process because I think everybody has some areas that you don't really see or understand, especially as you're coming in and you're trying to take everything in. So being open to that and like learning about people's experiences from interviewers, hiring managers, founders, everybody.
Yeah.
So taking all of that into account. So it was I would say the bulk of that was really interesting. But my talent philosophy and my philosophy generally, again, I said earlier, is to make sure that the talent function is a strategic partner, because I think that's where we can add
Right.
the most value if we are in that position. So that was my internal personal mission at Labelbox, is to really establish that from the get go, and it was really cool working with everybody through that. And I think for some stakeholders, this approach was quite uh, new or maybe unusual or odd, however you want to call it. I think there were a few people who are just used to saying to recruiting, like, I need a
Order
person for this
takers.
role.
Yeah. Fill these roles. Come back to me with
Get me
the.
someone,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I don't really work like that. So it was I think a learning curve for everybody involved. But yeah, and then training our interviewers, I think that's also super important. Training our managers. So once you do have all of these structures in place, the structured
Yeah.
interview process, really going into things that I would say maybe for talent people, for recruiters, they might seem obvious, but what I've learned in my career is
Yeah.
that they're not for anyone else outside of recruiting or talent. So really going through everything, like during the kickoff, that is really my biggest opportunity and our biggest opportunity to reiterate the expectations. Go through the process again, and we
Right.
do this like to this day, even if we have worked with the same manager like 10 times, we still go through it. It's like,
Right. Because the
let's
process
make sure
works,
we're on
so
the
we
same
repeat
page.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that was really the motion, I would say, for the first year, and we were still growing. As I was working through this. So startup life, you wear a lot of hats, but
Yeah.
yeah, we got to a point where the plan for the following year was pretty ambitious, and I worked with the leadership team to really connect those business plans with what we had in terms of talent.
Sure.
um and that involved figuring out a headcount planning process, like that wasn't there either. So really
Okay.
connecting the dots for the strategy piece and making sure we have the right people in place and we have the budget to pay them, like
Yeah.
kind of the essentials. Um so yeah, once we had that in place, I hired two recruiters, one to handle the EPD, so kind of the tech side, engineering, product design, and one business recruiter to handle go to market and G&A. And my team has gone through some iterations as well, but I do strongly believe in the value of recruiting operations and talent operations. I think
Oh yeah, louder
it,
for the people in the back. Rec ops is important. Tell us
it's
why. Why is rec ops so important?
essential. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I mean, otherwise you're stuck with your recruiters
yeah,
doing, all of the operational stuff. So scheduling interviews, going back and forth with interviewers and hiring managers. Hey, can you move this meeting? Or,
right.
having to deal with last minute cancellations. This is extremely time consuming. Instead of having your recruiters actually focused on sourcing, reaching out, actually talking to candidates,
Building
closing,
relationships,
right?
right?
So yeah, I am a big fan, and I appreciate everybody in Rec Ops. I am a fan, and I really
Same,
recommend
same.
anyone to look at having this sort of function in the talent team. It's a big value add.
Totally agree. And so I want to unpack more on the talent advisory, talent partner piece because I think that's one of the things you have so much passionate about. And we were talking in the earlier calls about how at Labelbox your team adds value beyond just the hire. So let's talk about more detail on what is the value add that your recruiter brings to those stakeholders beyond just the hire. Is there anything measurable? And tell us more about that.
Yes. So is there anything measurable? Yes. It's kind of like a yes but type of answer here. So I'm gonna get into that. But first I can share, what my team is doing to really be that strategic partner for the business beyond just hiring recruiting. So what we started doing is really looking at kind of the reasons why we were getting backfills. So, to be very honest, it started from a place of selfishness because we did not want to deal with that many backfills. Not that we're lazy, it's just that I really want to set my team up for success in the sense of them focusing on bringing the highest candidates and hires that they can versus just having a revolving door and focused on
Right,
activity, right?
right.
So that was my reason. So, whenever we had a backfill come in, I started looking into that and having conversations with the manager, with the team, looking at performance reviews. So everything that I could get to really understand what the reason was for that departure, and for both voluntary and involuntary. It didn't really matter.
Regrettable, non-regrettable, all
Yeah,
attrition signals.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I that was eye-opening in the sense of, we took so many ideas from looking into that, and we realized there was so many opportunities for us to improve throughout the process, and even before we even, or like, the process for hiring, the process for onboarding, for the
Right,
whole employee experience. So we learned things that were beyond just hiring and recruiting. We
yeah,
were very happy with what we were doing for our job, for hiring people, but we're recruiters. We care about people and their experience, right? Like when we bring
right.
them into a company, we want them to have a great experience, and if that's not quite happening, then I care, at least, and my team cares. So we started looking into that and seeing, how we could improve it. So, to give you a few examples, there's quite a few things that we did, but I would say the most important ones, um, and actually the most important, probably the simplest, is covering this silent period of time between when the offer is signed
Oh, yeah.
and the first day of onboarding.
It's such a simple but challenging process to implement, right?
Yeah.
This
Yes.
post-signature period. How did you do that?
So what we did is we talked to, we tried to learn as much as possible about what was happening in that onboarding period. So both from like a company perspective, like HR and IT, but also from a department and team perspective, so more on the functional side of things. And we agreed to create a kind of a handoff point between recruiting and the
Sure.
onboarding team. So how we did that, we just created an email alias. It's welcome@labelbox.com, and we have
Simple enough.
HR,
Yeah.
we have IT, we have recruiting. So the recruiter introduces, sends an email to the candidate saying, well, the new hire, congratulations, we're super excited to have you, join
Yeah.
the team soon. here is your point of contact, and we name exactly who will be their point of contact in their first day and what to expect. So we map out exactly, here's what you need to do next, which is most likely the background check or, something similar like that, like
Yeah.
tying loose ends. When to expect to get your invite to set up your Google account or your Okta account. Really, every tiny thing that will happen, just to kind of answer every questions that they might have or they don't know they have until they will have it,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like
Unknown
already too
questions.
late.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what we really spend a lot of time really figuring out. What does that experience look like? What would make it
Yeah.
easier for someone joining? And sometimes, I mean, I think a lot of times people do have a little bit of that new job anxiety,
Oh,
like,
of course they do. There's the fear of the unknown and
yeah,
and excitement to join. But if you can get in front of it with this information and this welcoming spirit, it sounds like it really helps create the candidate experience or new hire experience that's
yeah,
optimal.
exactly. And it's also like a nice transition from the candidate experience, in which we have
Yeah.
put a lot of emphasis on this
Yeah.
relationship and always
Yeah.
making sure that we get back to candidates, no updates and all of that good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then really transitioning into the employee experience and not having that drop off point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was really key. And I'm sharing this in such detail because I think it's an easy thing to implement
Yeah.
and it's such an impactful thing. So I really recommend everyone to look into that because it's nice from the experience point of view, but I will also share from the business point of view. We've had this experience in certain regions of the world where it's
Sure.
quite common to continue interviewing even after you've signed the offer letter.
Oh, now we're talking. Yes. Yes.
And we've had
Yes.
situations, unfortunately, where, we thought, like, great, we filled this role, moving on to the next.
Yeah.
And then when they were supposed to start, we didn't have anybody show up. So that really put us behind on that role. So that helped with that as well, like really keeping on top of what's happening in
So
that period of time.
what I'm hearing is, and I totally agree. I've talked to countless talent leaders, especially those whose company has embraced nearshore, offshore, and global expansion. At any point, they've learned that different regions have different expectations in terms of what a candidate might do post offer period. And in
Mhm.
some cultures and regions, it's normal and standard to continue offer shopping. And what
Yeah.
I'm hearing is this very simple solution that you implemented at Labelbox, the onboarding email handle welcome@company.com, and this continued warm experience for the candidate to have these touch points, these onboarding mechanics be streamlined, and then hopefully their start date, hopefully attrition is reduced, win for the business, and then win for the employee who ultimately starts and enjoys their onboarding experience.
Yeah.
Um, I'd love to kind of shift gears actually to talk a bit about the different regional growth strategies that you've seen under your entire growth strategy and the levers that you've pulled to get there. So, if you wouldn't mind, share with the audience here. What regions has Labelbox expanded into? So where are you now? You're global. Tell us a bit about that. And then, what are the growth strategies or the levers you've pulled to launch and hire in all of these new markets?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it was a very interesting exploration, especially with a small team. Right now, we are focused on our hub in San Francisco. We have a European hub in Wrocław, Poland, and we
Poland,
also
okay.
have a small team in India. So this is where these are our three main locations at the moment. We do have people who, I think everyone kind of went on this exploration to figure out what remote means for them and what, hybrid means for them. For
Yes.
us, what we landed on and what works for us is to have a kickoff meeting in person, kind of like a mini internal conference at the beginning of the year. And then we also have quarterly in person, we call them co-working weeks. And
Very
it's really
cool.
just where everybody kind of comes in the office and has in person meetings and collaborations, hackathons,
Yeah.
really, unblocking each other essentially when you have in
Yeah.
person collaboration.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of to give some context on that. In terms of hiring, depending on our our team's capacity, I always tie it back to my recruiting team's capacity and what they can do realistically. Most of the times they over deliver, but I would rather have that
They're
happen
well
than
trained. We would expect this. Yeah.
yeah, of course, recruiters, right? So um and throughout this whole expansion, we have engaged with different partners, either local partners for, I would say, for Poland. We've explored Canada a little bit. It was a little bit of a learning curve as well for us, like what markets work for us, what don't. So,
Yeah.
and that's how we were able to land on these locations. At the moment, I have my core team. So, as I said, the two recruiters who are now talent partners. And I supplemented the capacity with a few contractors and also with RPOs and a few trusted contingency agencies that we've been working for a long time. So a little bit of everything to make sure that we can gear up as fast as possible, and we're at and we're also conscious of the cost, obviously, the
Oh,
expense
of
that
course. And
this.
having flexibility, especially in this dynamic market, is so important. And, talent leaders right now, I'm hearing a mantra are, you know, having anxiety about overstaffing full time TA teams. So having
Yeah.
flexibility with tools and infrastructure to make entire teams more efficient is one important lever to pull. We'll talk more about that. And then having trusted global talent partners. And I'm hearing you with the contractors in and out of TA and RPO to have that flex. And as you choose if you can tell the audience, that's maybe contemplating a flexible solution, what do you look for in a vendor, an RPO, a contractor, that's the right fit for you? What are those questions you should ask a vendor to make sure that they can do what you need them to do?
Yeah, I think for us, for Labelbox specifically, being in the industry, in the space that we're in, and the type of roles that we're hiring for, generally are pretty specific.
Yeah,
And so my main question is, or curiosity is trying to learn about their experience either within that space or with similar roles, or something at least as technical as like the roles that we're trying to fill, even if
right.
it's not the exact role. So, and then I look at how does that recruiter that they're going to assign to me, how are they really thinking about recruiting? Is it more of a like cowboy style, or are we thinking about a okay, let's learn about the process, or
Well
and
said.
collaborate with the team, like
Yeah,
really embed in my team while they're with us. um Obviously, we said the expectations and everything, but there are certain preferences. So I think, especially for such a kind of immediate short-term engagement, it's
yeah,
important to get as much as, or like remove as much as of these questions, or
yeah.
maybe opportunities for misalignment.
Friction or a
Yeah,
gap.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I hear
yeah,
you, and I see that decision by talent leaders that are choosing that lever where it's like we need an immediate impact. So the resource needs to have experience in a similar company size, domain, and with these direct roles, and hopefully some strategy and network that they can bring firepower straight away versus a long ramp. And so that might mean, of course, that they've been at an AI startup recently, or they know how to deeply qualify these roles quickly. And it also might mean that they know your TA tech stack intimately, or can at least use the right tools to get the job done. I'm curious, tell us about your TA stack at Labelbox. What's been working? What's been helping do more with less? The hot topic in tech right now.
yes. My tech stack has also gone through many iterations over the past few years because of many reasons. One would be budget, but the second one would be also how fast so many tools, pop
Oh,
up every
the
day.
landscape is changing quickly. It's an
Yeah,
exciting time.
it
Yeah.
is. It is. And so right now, mine is pretty straightforward. We have Greenhouse for our ATS and Gem for our sourcing and outreach. And that is about it, if you can believe it. Obviously, LinkedIn and, kind of the basics.
Right.
But in terms of actual, yeah, tools, like this is it. We did have a tool for scheduling, automating scheduling, which was
Oh,
very useful. However, we had to cut that because we went through that phase of slowing
cost
down
cutting
hirings
exercise.
and
Right.
yeah, all of that fun period of time. However, something interesting happened where both Gem and Greenhouse started expanding their product offering, and are now covering the scheduling piece. And I
Yes.
have seen this trend of kind of all tools wanting to be the tool
Right.
for
Tool
everything.
consolidation. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So that's worked in our favor, but with, some challenges along the way, like really being an early adopter, it's exciting, but also, trying to work through certain snags and like really figuring out how it works, and the recruiters having to learn it and like ramp it up, integrate it in their process. That
Right.
takes a little bit of time, but I think it's worth it in the end. I've always been very mindful of the amount of tools that I added to my tech stack, just
Right.
because I
Right.
think if you overdo it, it can really work against you.
There can be a
um,
lot of noise and adoption can be
yeah,
slow. So it's like,
yeah,
why spend on a tool we have to force the team to use? So I
yeah.
hear you and I agree. And I do think um, the TA talent infrastructure space is being disrupted now. I think there's some folks that are building great tools for solving a different talent function, time saving components. We have uh, video recording tools like
Hmm.
BrightHire and MetaView that are doing really well, and
Yeah.
teams are quoting quite a bit of time saved with tools like this. And of course, sourcing is being disrupted, and there's a whole maybe taboo topic around full autopilot or co-pilot type sourcing tools. And I'll put a pin in that topic for some future episodes. But
Yeah.
uh, fair enough to say that the space is being disrupted and these tools are enhancing our talent teams, helping them do more with less and really just be more efficient and ultimately find the right candidates more quickly, build relationships more meaningfully, and hopefully make hiring more streamlined.
Yeah.
And so, all this to be said, there's a topic around, of course, training our teams, upskilling our teams, L&D with our teams. And I know you were just at a conference talking about some of these things. And fill us in on what you learned and what you've learned as a talent leader in the past few months and from some of these conferences about the talent space and how we're really coupled with things beyond just the recruiting transaction.
Hmm. I think, my what I learned, and it was very reassuring, is that my experience, I'm not alone in this, basically, and
Oh
it makes
no,
me
we're
feel a little
together.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is an exciting trend that I saw with recruiting really moving more into this talent space and being a strategic talent partner. That was actually what my talk was about, connecting the dots
Funny
across
enough.
all these things.
Yeah.
Um, so it was really cool to see how, on the other L&D track, they were talking about the same thing that we were talking about on the TA track at the conference, and really embedding as much as possible and moving away from, the old school surveys, and
Yeah.
really focusing on relationships with your hiring managers, with your teams, really thinking strategically about what you can do that is more impactful maybe to the immediate team that you're working on, and not trying to, you know, boil the ocean basically, and like impact change or affect change at that scale in the first phase. So kind of starting
Yeah.
small, seeing
Yeah.
what you can do to really help the business, and you really embodying that whole mantra of doing more with less.
Yeah.
I know, given, how this came about, it can be a little frustrating to hear it again, but it's also an opportunity to really rethink how you're doing things, and like
Yeah.
rethink what's the most
Challenge the
important thing
status
that.
quo. Yeah.
Exactly. And I always like to take any opportunity I have to do that. And I think that's what's kind of happening in the industry, which is really exciting to see.
Yeah,
Um,
we were talking about that in the evolution from, the pre-COVID era and even the Zerpa era of growth at all costs. And I think that as an industry, we got away from being aware of the unit economics of recruiting, and we were forced into this grow, 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 endless blank check policy for many companies to grow. And then we
mhm.
got caught on our heels as an industry. I think many companies overhired, it's fair to say, and had cuts. And now that we're right sizing, I'm seeing talent leaders and talent functions really become more closely partnered with finance and the business much more careful with planning, and much more careful with the cost analysis of what that might look
Yeah.
like and measurable impact on the business. And
Yeah.
for some talent leaders, that looks like things beyond just cost per hire and old metrics like this, but things like quality of hire and how can we
Mhm.
measure talent density and our downstream impact. And
Yeah.
I'm curious if you're seeing, similar trends in the industry too.
Absolutely. I think quality of hire, that's a funny topic to talk about. Maybe we add it to the next episode with all of the
Part
metrics.
two, quality of hire. Yeah.
Um, but I will say what we did was to really look into the performance cycles that we had going on and seeing how we first can align that across the whole company, because we had certain departments, being more
Yeah.
interested in that topic than others. So first we aligned it at the business level, and then second we did quarterly talent reviews, we call them. It's very quick, and we do have calibration meetings with leaders across departments so that we minimize bias from just the manager. We get more context. And the crucial point that I really insisted on from the beginning was to align as a group on what that growth area is for that person. Like, yes, we
Sure.
identified maybe they're not doing so well in this area, but how is the manager, how can we as a business help them? But also what can the manager do to
Mm.
help them improve in that area?
Yeah.
So really putting the emphasis on what the manager can do, because that's how we view managers at Labelbox, just being people leaders and supporting the growth of their teams. And that's also how you kind of impact that growth mindset as well.
I agree.
And support those relationships between managers and employees, and that impacts retention. And you can go into all of these things, so everything is really connected, is my point.
Everything is
Yeah.
so connected. Yes, and it comes back to that talent partner, talent advisory component of recruiters and talent partners really being more than order takers, but advisors throughout the entire process, and that does include that post hire period and that delicate period we talked about, post signature, pre start date. And
Yeah.
so, we've talked about a lot today, and kind of tying a bow on the talent philosophy that you bring to Labelbox and the audience tuning in today is that talent has changed, and in order to adapt, being a talent advisor means looking beyond just the headcount and filling those roles, but the end-to-end impact that we have on our business and our finance teams, which might look like things quality per hire, months down the road. It might look like processes that reduce attrition, and it might look like things like talent intelligence with what
Mhm.
market to launch in. India, Poland, perhaps North America, Canada, or wherever a company is looking to hire. So I want to be aware of the time that we're in this country with the election on Tuesday and ask a question, Elena, about your crystal ball. So when we do this next episode, say it's a year from now, and we've had 12 months from this recording date to the next episode, what will the tech world and what will the talent world look like? How might it be different from today?
Hmm. That's a great question. Whenever I'm asked this question, I can't help but to answer from a place of optimism. So
Same.
I think, um, I think we're already seeing some signs of growth, and I hope that everyone who has gone through this, these last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years since the
Yeah,
pandemic happened, really took some lessons from that experience, and hopefully they're taking that lessons into the upcoming period of growth that hopefully we're going to see. So meaning not over hiring and then firing, so really not maybe breaking some cycles there. So I'm hoping I will be able to we will be able to have that conversation in a year and say, yeah, the industry has changed. We are not making the same mistakes again. We have learned our lesson, and we're growing at a more sustainable pace and more intentionally. We're thinking about intentionally growing our businesses and
I
really
agree.
always staying aligned with the business objective and keeping our eyes on the prize. And I think the other part for the talent piece, I really hope that we're, not hearing any sort of conversations anymore about you have to take your seat at the table. And, talent doesn't have a seat at the table. So hopefully we're going to be in a world where everyone, it's implied that talent needs to be at
Yeah.
the table to make any sort of business decision. So I'm hoping that's going to be the world we're going to live in a year.
Well, I share this cautious optimism with you. I'm already seeing trends and signals of yes, an uptick. And I think that there's clear election anxiety here in the States, and that whatever happens in the coming weeks, hopefully there's less uncertainty. Hopefully there's continued intentional hiring, like you said. And then I'll say for holistically for the talent industry, as it relates to some of those tools and partners, that the intentionality is focused there too, with AI safety that helps talent be more efficient and helps our teams do more with less, and helps our teams become that next evolution of talent partners. And then I also hope that, as a tech industry, we continue to see responsible growth. There's
Mhm.
some industries, AI, that Labelbox is a part of, that have some high upswings in hiring, and I hope that we continue to see other industries follow that trend behind some of those. Let's call them FANG type companies. There tends to be a follow the leader mentality,
Mhm.
and as FANG companies pick up hiring through and after the holidays, I think that will have downstream effects on startups as VCs loosen their belts and maybe write some larger checks as well.
Mhm.
So all this to be said, I do see good things coming in 2025 for the talent community and the tech community. And with that, I'm grateful for you sharing your words of wisdom with us today. Elena, you clearly are an inspirational talent leader to your team at Labelbox, and I'm grateful for you sharing this nuggets of wisdom with the Lean In podcast today.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.